Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hamilton Report. I'm delighted that you decided to join us this evening. And as always, I'm humbled by the way that you allow us into your home or your place of business for this half hour each week. I feel like I really come to know some of our viewers very well, and that's because of the kind feedback that you offer, the constructive criticism that you provide, and also the topics that you share with me that you would like to see covered on the Hamilton Report. Just a reminder that our chair goes live every day at 4:15 on Facebook and YouTube, and I hope that you will avail yourself of the timely information that she provides every weekday. These are short segments. Most of them are 5 to 8 minutes, but they're packed with information that you can not only use yourself, but share with others. And speaking of others, I hope that you will continue to share this broadcast on social media and email links to friends, because the more people that hear our message, the more informed our electorate and the better off it is for all of Oklahoma, because our commitment is to be more blue in 2022. Well, this is Martin Luther King Jr. birthday. And it's a holiday that I certainly don't mind working, because there's so much of what Dr. King said and did in his life and his ministry and his legacy of civil rights that it's an honor to be able to look back now, even all these years later, at the relevance of what he had to say and the deeply, deeply held commitment that he had for social justice for all people. It's what drives much of the work of the Oklahoma Democratic Party, and it's much of what drives me personally to a world of more inclusion and allowing everyone not only a seat at the table, but a microphone at that seat so that every voice can be heard. Well, I needed to have someone on this evening to better articulate why Dr. King's legacy is so strong even today. And I could think of no one else that I would rather have than my friend, Reverend Dr. Semaj Vanzant. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the Hamilton Report, Pastor. Welcome.
Thank you so very much. I'm excited to be here. I really am. Been watching and been a spectator, and so it is just a great joy to join you and this wonderful listening and viewers especially on this day.
I always try to share with our viewers some of my guests I've never met in person, others I've known for a long time. And I should say that you and I have been friends for a number of years now. And actually, we were neighbors in Brooklyn before we ever met one another here in Oklahoma City.
That's right.
It's so interesting that we lived so close to one another in Bed-Stuy and where your work was. And then you came to Oklahoma City where we met. And I will tell you that of all of the experiences that I've had with you, there was only one that terrified me. And that is when you invited me to speak to a group of Black folks on the importance of LGBT inclusion in the Black worship experience.
Yeah.
I'm like, what has he set me up for?
You were the person for it.
That was a time when I was doing a lot of education and training around LGBT inclusivity, and that's still a great passion of mine. But what was so interesting is we began that time together with people with their arms folded, and it's like, I'm not listening to this man.
Right.
I don't want to hear what he has to say. But by the end of the evening, people were coming up to me and telling me about their granddaughters or their niece or nephew, and wanted to know how they could support them. So our history goes back a while, and I continue to be a very strong admirer of yours. And we should tell folks that you are joining us from New Jersey.
Right.
That's where you live now.
That's right. Moved, felt God calling me to lead a church here in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And so it's been, I'm in my 7th year. Can you believe that?
That's crazy.
Yeah, time flies by. And it's been a great work, though, another community where I've been able to continue a lot of the advocacy work that I've done and that I was doing in Oklahoma City. And a lot of what I do, what I say, how I conduct myself, and how I encourage others to lead, I attribute, to what I learned from you. And so I'm so grateful for that. This community is different and changing. More people are becoming more receptive and inclusive
Mm.
because of the work. And so, you are a strong influence in my life. And so I am grateful that I get to share what you have shared with me so freely with so many here. It is having tremendous impact. So Scott, your work not only goes from New York to Oklahoma City, but it also spans right here to New Jersey.
Now, one thing I just can't figure out: why would anyone leave Oklahoma for the Jersey Shore? I don't understand. That makes no sense to me.
Right. We're not going to mention New York, the ocean,
Yeah, no, no, no. I
So,
bought two swimming pools last summer. Both of them popped within the first time I used them, and I thought,
oh,
no, this is not the ocean.
no.
Well, listen, we could talk like this all day, but the reason you're
Yeah.
here is I'd like for you to talk a little, please, about why, after all this time, Dr. King's writings, his words, his speeches, his sermons remain so very relevant, and that's not limited at all to the Black community. His words, his aspirations, his ideals expanded to people of all races, ethnicities, creeds. People around the world not only know of Dr. King, but they know his work. And so,
Right.
why, after all this time, does it still resonate in the hearts and minds of people?
I think it still resonates because of the very fact that it is not about any one group of people, but it is about everybody. And what Dr. King helped us to realize is that we are only as strong as our weakest link, right? That if we can't discriminate one group of people, whoever they may be, and think that that's going to make another group better, right? He talks about that when Dr. King says that we live in this web of mutuality. Or another quote is a threat to justice. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so we hear these statements still resonate within our society because we have yet to recognize the humanity in everybody, right?
Hmm.
And one of the things that is so fortunate about the King is that people pigeonhole or try to pigeonhole his work, his writings, his speeches for a particular group of people, namely African Americans, because he was African American. But all of what he writes and what he does defies what people try to do to his work, which is to say, listen, this is not just about one particular group of people, it's about all of us. And one of the things, Scott, that really, this pandemic has exacerbated and really put a magnifying glass on the disparities that exist, especially economically, right? And I tell people all the time, the thing that got Dr. King killed was his wanting to fight for economic equality, and not just and his and he was getting traction to realize that, listen, this is not just a black against white thing, but this is, listen, he started saying, if you can't afford this, no matter who you are, what you look like, where you live, then this is wrong in a country that has so much. And so Dr. King, over 50 years ago, was murdered for that idea, that concept, this matter of justice. And yet we come to a pandemic, and if we don't see just how how big a gap, how great the injustice is as it relates to economics, because we saw people of all kinds, abilities, standing in line trying to get food. We saw people of all classes dying, right? We saw people of, this pandemic has really shown us, and to me, I believe this pandemic has shown us why everybody ought to be running to every book that Dr. King wrote, every sermon that he preached, every letter that he wrote. We need to be finding out how is it that we can implement what he said, because we cannot afford as a society to have another one of these type of pandemics or epidemics that causes that we where we see that we are all humans, right? I think that's what this pandemic did. It showed that your money, your skin color, your connections, your education, none of that matters. That at the basis of it all, we are all humans. And so I think that Dr. King's writings are even more significant now, because we can see what he was trying to say. And yeah, I just think that
But
that's why I say
I'm gonna argue with you a moment there, because while I agree with you that that's what should have happened in the pandemic,
right,
the people who can see that are people like you and me,
right,
and we've understood that already.
right,
I heard on the radio on Friday, or I think it was Friday, and they were talking about the way that economic disparity plays into the pandemic. And they looked at one particular corporation where someone making $25,000 a year versus someone making over $100,000 a year in the same company.
wow,
The people at $25,000 a year were 8 times more likely to become infected with COVID.
yeah,
They're also the ones who don't have unlimited sick time,
right,
or cannot take time away from their office, or cannot work remotely.
yeah,
And so what we've seen is that the disparities are not just economic, that they roll into healthcare, they roll into senior age, they impact education. And so to that, I think that you're stunningly right. I just wish that more people would open themselves to understanding that. The other thing I'd like to revisit is something that you said a moment ago, and that is, how do we implement Dr. King's desires for this country? Because ideals are just that.
right,
There's something to work towards, something that we hope will happen. But unless we know how to do that, unless we
yeah.
can put those things into play, then we're actually not moving forward. So let me ask you, where does it start? Does it start in the home? Does it start in the church or in school? Or
I,
where do we begin to make the most significant changes that will impact not just our generation, but the ones that come after us? You're the father of 2 young sons.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I cannot
absolutely.
imagine the conversations that have to be had with 2 young Black kids about how they live their lives. You will be having discussions with your children that my dad never had to have with me.
Right, right.
And so where do we start to implement Dr. King's hopes and ideals?
So, I want to address all three of those places. I believe it starts in the home, and I believe it starts with self-love, right? And what we tell
Mm,
ourselves about ourselves, right? That no matter who you are, what your skin color is, or economic, that you are a person who is loved, that you're worthy of love, and that you should love, right? And so, and love is not defined by any material things, but love is defined by the fact that I see that we are both created by the Creator, right? And so, whoever you are, however you look, that I love you because I love me. Going to move together. We are in this on this earth, planet Earth. We're in this community, wherever, and we need to exist together. So we I have to learn to love me so that I can also learn to love others. It also comes in a language that we teach our children. Carla and I are very. My wife is Carla. We're very intentional about the way that we refer to other people. We don't talk about. We say, "What are you?" Let's describe them. Yes, they may be maybe Hispanic origin, or they may be white person. They may be from an Indian descent. It is okay to identify that and still and realize that they may be different. And I coined the words of Dr. Jeremiah Wright. They may be different, but they're not deficient, right? We're all human. We all have different abilities, and we celebrate the diversity because life would be pretty boring if everybody was the same. And so I think we have to we have to make sure that we realize that we are loved, worthy of love, and out of that we will love. And then what language do we use to refer to other to people that are not ourselves, right? And what do we expect, right? I expect for other people the same that I expect for myself. And so I want rights, I want health care, I want the ability to afford certain and receive certain inalienable rights. And I don't just want it for me though, I want it for everybody, because everybody who's a human deserves it. And then I think it comes in, and it's the home and in the school, right? Schools have to be intentional. I know there's this big blow up about something that many people just don't understand, right? We're calling it critical race theory, but most people couldn't define it if you paid them to do it, right? Because they just don't understand what it is. But we have to be intentional in our schools. And so one of the things that Carl and I have done and have been adamant about, that the books that are used, that they represent people of diverse of backgrounds, right? So we're not looking at books with all blonde hair, blue-eyed people, right? Because that's not how the world is, right? We have bought books and donated them to the school. The books that we have here have people of all races, have people of all abilities, handicaps, have people, with vitiligo, and I mean, but we're very intentional about, and then we buy books of different cultures, right? How do people experience different cultures? Because we want our kids to know that, listen, we are not in this world alone. And there's small microcosms, and I really wish we could just scale this across the world. But our children are in an intentional Montessori education, but it is intentional in that the students can span the spectrum on in ethnicity and economic social status, in family types, right, from home, different types of family makeups, and all these different things. And so these 22 kids that will become more every year are getting such a rich experience, because they're going to different homes, they're interacting with different people, they're realizing, they're seeing the humanity in others, that your house may be bigger than mine, your family may look different than mine, but guess what? We're all able to play, we're all able to talk, we're all able to learn together. And so it is impacting not just the children, but their families too.
Of
and
course.
and I just have to believe that it is going beyond the families, to their friend groups, to their communities, to their job, to their work environments, and we're having an impact. And so I think that's how we begin to implement Dr. King's legacy, right? Is in loving ourselves, right? Because he promoted that we have to love others, but we can't love anybody else unless we love ourselves. That's biblical principle, right? Love God and then love your others as you love yourself. And then we have to think about the language that we use, right? That we cannot refer. It is not a us and them, right? It's not a zero sum game, as Heather's book talks about. It is about the fact that we all want the same things for our families, right? And we all deserve the same rights. Especially in America, where we waste more than, I mean, people can even imagine, right? And where things are so blatant. I tell you, you look at some of these court cases, you look at some of the interactions with law enforcement and people, with law enforcement, with transgender individuals, with with Black and brown people. You look at the way that BIPOC individuals are stifled for leadership in both nonprofit and corporate sectors. I mean, you look across and things are just so to you and and I mean, I would hope the world common sense. It's like, come on, let's get to this dream that Dr. King has. And unfortunately, we're still, too many people are still dreaming about it. I think, what it's time for action. Let's wake up. Let's put it in place in small microcosms like this school, or you see work, that people are doing in various sectors that are just having a tremendous impact, and really um honest news sites, right? I mean, which are
Oh,
hard
boy.
to find. Oh my gosh! But there are some, who are giving honest reports. Are beginning to open some people's eyes, and also I want to say thank God for technology, right?
Yes.
Because we're able to see so many more things than before. And I think explicitly about George Floyd or the other young man in Minnesota, and some of the other things that are happening around our country. That we're able to see so much more. And so it's no longer just this fictional thing, but it is actually, it's real, it's happening, and it's impacting people like never before.
I agree with you. I mean, citizen journalists have changed the
Yeah,
entire landscape, not just of news, but the way that we're able to see in real time
yeah,
things that before we would never have even heard about. And so
right.
I agree with you. I'm going to switch gears for a moment, um, and ask you specifically about this quote. Dr. King once famously said that 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is the most segregated hour of the week. We have made some progress in making more worship experiences interracial, but we still have churches that are predominantly or historically white and historically black. How do we begin, or is it even necessary, to begin to dismantle the whole division and just start to bring people into worship experience together?
Yeah, one of the things that I've put into practice myself with my congregation is finding. We know that Sunday morning is a segregated time, so let's find other times, right? Because nobody seems to want
Mhm.
to give up anything on their Sunday morning, and there is merit to that, right? As because people enjoy different things, speak to different people.
Sure.
So one of the things that we've done is find other times and other places and spaces where we can worship together. And it's been wonderful. And even so, one thing, there's a multicultural church here that's predominantly white that we worship with every year, and I think for the last 4 or 5 years now, and we actually do it on a Sunday morning. So we have our one set time where we do it every Sunday, but then we find other times where we serve together, where we are giving, times where there incident, things around the country, and we'll give together or we'll work on different things together. And
Mm.
so one of the concepts for me is that worship is more about, it is more than just let's come together, sing, preach, um, you know, uh, um, in those moments and those times, but it's also about how do we live out everything that I just learned. And so, like this church and I, sure Christian, we have this thing called Serve 24, where I know when I grew up, we used to have 24-hour prayer services, but we're doing the Serve 24, where for 24 hours straight, we have teams from both of our churches, and now we're recruiting other churches that come together, and we're working together, and we're serving, on different projects, and it goes for 24 hours, and it is an absolutely amazing experience because people that would have never worked together talked with each other, right? And the idea came from my reading of the book, and the author slipped my mind, but same kind of different as me, where this rich art dealer met this guy who was he was introduced to guy who was essentially recently released from being a slave. Um, so the rich art dealer's wife introduced her to this husband and this former slave, and they became the best of friends after some tension conversations, realizing that, hey, we want the same thing. We're both human. And so really just this stretch to say, well, if we can get more people engaging with one another, then we'll be better off. And worship doesn't always afford us that, right? Because you're looking at the back of somebody's head, everybody's looking toward the one preacher or the one choir and what have you. But
And
when
they're
we're
praying
serving,
silently that the pastor won't make them stand up the first time that they visit the church.
that's right. You're not gonna move me. So and so, but when we're serving together, when we're working together, when we are rallying together for certain issues or standing up, at council meetings and things together, and the meetings that precede that type of engagement is really changing the landscape. And so, while there is progress, and I agree, and there are multicultural environments for worship, if those environments and the pastors, particularly, can teach that humanity can and stop putting politics in the pulpit, right? Mention the injustices, talk about the social ills and what God's word has to say about them. But politics does not belong in the pulpit. And if they can teach that there is no other, but we are all God's creation, and we ought to all want the same thing for each other. If that can be taught even in the segregated pulpits, then we can engage. We'll be better equipped to engage people outside of the worship spaces and really make a bigger difference. And I believe, send a sweet smelling fragrance into the nostrils of our God.
There you go. I tell you, this time has moved so quickly today, and I wish we had a couple of hours because there's so much more I'd like to delve into. But you said something that made me realize that we need a shift in thinking, and that is, instead of simply reading Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech, we should be coming out and saying, "I have a plan."
There you go.
To implement the aspects of the dream that are still alive.
That's right.
You are an inspiration to me. I'm grateful for your friendship and the fact that you took time on this holiday evening to spend with us. I'm so appreciative, and I'm going to ask that you stay open to coming back to visit with us, because I want to hear more about what you're doing cross-culturally to serve the people of your community, because that's something that we can replicate in every community in the country.
Absolutely. We'd love to come back, and you're doing such great work here. And this Hamilton Report is so needed. And I'm so glad you're really filling in a missing piece of the puzzle of society. And my hope is that it will continue to grow and expand. And whenever you call, I am ready to accept the invitation.
Thank you so much. Please give your wife and boys our love, and we'll be talking real soon. Reverend Dr. Semaj Vanzant, thank you for being with us tonight. I'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you.
Well, a lot to think about, and like I said, the time ran very quickly tonight. But that's what happens when you have a smart person who helps us to think. And I'm already thinking about some things differently than I would have half an hour ago, and I hope the same is true for you. Just want to remind you that it's critically important that you vote. It's critically important that we all register more people to vote. And I ask that you will do everything you can to make sure everyone you know is registered, because that's the way we make a change. That's the way we go from dreaming to planning to doing. And I hope that you will join me and all of us at the Democratic Party in Oklahoma to continue to strive to make a difference, a positive impact in the lives of every child, every adult, every senior in this state. Because as we do that, more people will notice And perhaps finally, Oklahoma will have an example, a positive example for the rest of the country. From all of us at the Hamilton Report and the Oklahoma Democratic Party, I'm Scott J. Hamilton, thanking you for being with us this evening. It's always a pleasure and an honor that I do not take for granted when you allow me to come into your home on Monday evening. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week right here, Monday evening at 6:30 on the Hamilton Report. Good night.